This video covers how to apply through the SBA for the $10,000 emergency grant that was made possible by the CARES Act that was passed March 27th, 2020. This grant was intended to get money into the hands of small businesses as quickly as possible. My name is Scott Brumley. I'm a partner with Brumley Robson and Associates CPAs. We have an office in Huntersville and Charlotte, North Carolina. To receive this grant, you have to apply through the SBA for their Economic Injury Disaster Loan. At the very end of the application, there's a section to request a $10,000 emergency grant. After you submit your application, you would receive the money within 3 banking days. The emergency grant is just part of the total Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So you're applying for a loan to pay for your operating expenses that you were not able to pay for because of the COVID virus pandemic. If for some reason at the end of the review process you were not accepted for the additional loan money, they would not require you to pay back the $10,000 that you received for the emergency grant. This assumes you are eligible to receive the Economic Injury Disaster Loan in the first place. So I would caution you just to make sure that you do qualify to apply for the grant. Most businesses do, but there are some occasions where you may not be. So who qualifies? You have to be a business with not more than 500 employees, or an individual who operates as a sole proprietorship, either with or without employees, or as an independent contractor. You could also be a 501c3 organization. And you have to be a business that has expenses that they can't pay because of the disaster. Do you have rent, payroll, accounts payable, other bills? The loan is not intended to replace lost income or lost revenue. So if all you have is income, you just say you receive just a commission check and you have no expenses, then that's not a situation where this loan would apply. This loan is to give you the ability to pay expenses that you would not be able to otherwise because of the lost revenue. You also have to have a physical presence in the declared disaster area. That means that the business has to have a physical presence. And you have to have been in operation by January 31st, 2020. So you can't form a new business just to take advantage of this loan. Although the $10,000 emergency grant portion of the Economic Injury Disaster Loan is forgivable, the remainder funds that were dispersed for the loan, for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, is not forgivable, but it would be paid out over a 30-year term. The other program that is out there now that was made possible by the CARES Act is the Paycheck Protection Program. And a lot of people like that loan program better because the loan is forgivable or potentially forgivable depending on whether your payroll maintains certain numbers or not. The PPP is applied through the banks, but the banks as of April 1st don't have their applications ready. So as of today, you can't apply for the PPP program, but you can apply for the EIDL. And you can also receive the $10,000 in 3 days. One option of the PPP is that you can refinance the existing Economic Injury Disaster Loan into it. That would allow that loan then to be made forgivable if you meet certain criteria. You apply for the loan by going to the SBA.gov website and clicking on the Click Here link at the top. The application process is much more streamlined than it has been in the past. There are just 4 pages of information to fill out and then a summary page at the end before you submit. At the top of the first page is where you choose what type of entity you are and that you're eligible to participate in the program. For most businesses, you're going to be choosing one of the top 2. The first one is if you're an LLC or a corporation or a partnership with not more than 500 employees. If you're an individual sole proprietorship, you would choose the second option. There would be cases where you would choose one of the other ones, but down at the bottom are probably the next two most common. One is that perhaps you're a part of a franchise that has more than 500 employees, but your specific location has no more than 500. In that case, you would choose that option. Or if you're a nonprofit organization, you would choose the last option. But read through the other ones just to make sure you're not either of the other options, but they're less common. At the bottom of the first page is where you state that you're not one of the prohibited businesses. So just go through each one just to make sure that it doesn't apply to you, and check it if it does not. At the bottom of each page, there is a continue button, and that button will be a little grayed out if there's a required item that has not been completed, or if there's an item that has been filled out in a format that's incorrect. Once it lights up to a darker shade of blue, then all the items, required items, are completed, and you can click it and continue to the next page. So we just completed the first page, so you can see this process is pretty streamlined and it's not going to require a lot of time to complete. We now are on the second page for business information. Now on this page, you're just listing the business name. I would check with the Secretary of State's website if you're a corporation or an LLC. Make sure that you're using the name, legal name, as specified with the Secretary of State. And also, if you notice that there are little asterisks by certain fields, that means it's a required field. And if it's been completed, the required field's been completed, there's a little green box over to the far left. Down at organizational type, you click on that to choose what type of entity you are, whether you're an LLC or sole proprietor or so on. And then down at the bottom, you state whether you're a nonprofit, yes or no, or a franchise. A little further down on that second page is a section where they're asking for some gross revenue and cost of goods sold. And this causes a little bit of confusion with a lot of my clients that I'm helping fill this out. This does not impact the amount of loan you're going to receive. It's the main purpose of these questions are to determine whether or not you are a small business and thus eligible to participate. So to be a small business, your gross receipts are probably going to be less than 20 million. But depending on your industry classification, it would be a different amount. But for, if you're just your receipts are in a small number of millions of dollars, you're still considered a small business. So, but they are requesting this information. So the gross revenue, if you look at your prior year tax return, would be just the gross receipt. So here I've got a Schedule C, and you can see it was what would have been reported on line 1. And the cost of goods sold, they're not talking about your expenses. They're just talking about the cost of what you're selling if you sell something. So in some cases, that may just be 0. And notice that they're asking for the 12-month period starting backwards from January 31st of 2020. So it's not merely the numbers on the tax return, which would have been the calendar year ending December 31st, but it would be pretty close. And then a lot of the other questions, in most cases, don't need to be filled out unless they apply to you. For most businesses, they do not, but there are occasions when it would. So I've kind of highlighted some of the key wording that would let you know whether it applied to you. So if, in other words, nonprofit or faith-based. If you're not a faith-based entity, you just leave it blank. And if you received compensation from other sources as a result of a disaster. So for most cases, that's going to be 0. But if for some reason the disaster created a new line of business, then perhaps you would put something there. And as we continue on toward the bottom of the page, there's a place where you put in your addresses. And once again, this is the physical address of the business, so they don't want a P.O. box. I've highlighted a couple things. If you use your browser's fill-in form feature, be careful that where it's got county it's asking for county, and sometimes as it did here, it filled in the state instead of the county. So you just override that if that's the case. And phone number seems to be something that the fill-in forms has trouble with. It doesn't put it in the right format. So it looks like it is, but you may need to just type over that. And then that invalid format will go away. And as you can see, it's highlighted in red, meaning that you're not going to be able to continue on. So if your blue continue button is not a dark shade of blue, scroll back up and look for these type of errors and correct them, and then it should allow you to proceed. And then at the very bottom of the page, there's just some remaining information, a couple drop-down boxes where you would put the type of industry you're in. And depending on what you choose for business activity, a different set of detailed business activity would come up. For date established, that would be the date that the Secretary of State has you if you're a corporation or an LLC. And if you've changed the owners since that date, that's what the current ownership is. If it's only been one owner, then it would be the same date as the business established date. And notice that the next button has been blued out, and that was because of that phone number formatting issue that we had earlier. Once that's been corrected, then we're on to the third of the 4 pages. This is where they're asking for the owner's information. One thing that I've noticed when a lot of clients are filling this out is they miss this first question at the very top. And what it's asking is, are any of the owners of the business you're applying for also a business themselves? In most cases, that's not. It would be answered no, but if the owners were just individuals, but if you had an LLC as an owner of the business, then you would check yes, and it would ask information about the business owner. Title is a drop-down box. If you're an owner, go ahead and select owner, even if you're a president or CEO. The next section is just additional information about the owner. You continue down and fill in the address information. And notice there is a box to add an additional owner. If you have any owner that has a 20% or more interest, you would want to complete their information. So if there were no other 20% or more owners, then you would just click next. Here I have a formatting problem. That's why the blue box is not. But once you've added all the owners, you just click next. Usually on this page, the reason the next button is not lit up is because that first question about the business entity owner hasn't been marked. A lot of times people will go up and they'll look at the owner's addresses and everything looks fine. They can't figure out why it's not turned to active state. Once you've completed the business owner information, you're now on the 4th and final page. And at the top, it's just asking certification that there's no criminal offenses or indictments or arrests related to criminal offenses. Then you scroll down toward the middle, and if someone has helped you fill this out, they ask you to list that information and put in fee charged if there was any fee charged. One key feature is that you have an option of allowing the SBA to discuss any portion of the application with the representative you list there. So if you have your accountant information there, then they are allowed to speak with the SBA if they have any questions about the application. Notice a couple features here for the formatting. If you use a drop-down box to fill in any information, the formatting of the phone that we talked about before, and also it may just put the street in and leave off the city, state, and zip. So this field asks for street address and city, state on one line. Toward the bottom of the page, you get to the section where it now is asking whether you want the $10,000 advance. Be sure to check the box, and also notice that the order of the routing number and account number, it asks for account number first and then routing number. Most people are used to putting in routing number first and account number, so I've run across a couple situations where people have reversed it and put the information in wrong, which at the very bottom of the 4th page is the certification that everything is true and correct. Read through that, check it, then click next. Now you're on the summary page. Scroll down, make sure everything looks correct. If there's something you need to change, then scroll back up to the top and click the Edit button. Once everything's correct, at the very bottom is the CAPTCHA where you select that you're not a robot. But before you do, I recommend printing this page first so you have a record of what you submitted. Then clicking the CAPTCHA box and then clicking Submit. Once submitted, you'll receive your application number. I would print that for your records as well. If you've previously submitted an application for an economic injury disaster loan, but this was prior to the CARES Act when you're allowed to request a $10,000 advance, the SBA says that you should reapply and that it will not slow down your original submission. I thank you for watching, and we at Brumley Robinson wish you and your business good luck during these trying times.